Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Sher Downing, PhD. Sher is an EdTech strategist who loves bringing people and technology together. As CEO of Downing EdTech Consulting, her company provides e-learning design for entrepreneurial programs, affiliate partnerships with leading vendors, and professional coaching for those in the EdTech industry. With over 30 years of experience in the digital arena during the evolution of online learning, her focus is to define opportunities for individuals and companies in professional and organizational brand growth. Through her podcast, EdTech Speaks, she highlights unique guests who share how the EdTech industry impacts all aspects of the world. She recently founded the Speakers Resource Group, a centralized membership service to enhance all levels of professional development through training, community support, and direct access to industry experts. She also serves as a university board trustee, author, international speaker, and presenter. She is a regular contributor to Forbes, HBR Ascend, and Medium. Please join me in welcoming Sher Downing, who is also a dear friend and colleague. Welcome, Sher.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good, and delighted to finally have you on the podcast.
And I'm excited to finally be here.
Yes. So welcome and thank you for joining me on this. Well, as we're talking, I'm looking at over a foot of snow here in Boston, and you are in lovely Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes, where we're having a cold day. The high is going to be 63. You're going to need a coat and a scarf today, but blue sky, not a cloud to be seen, sunny and beautiful. So winter in Arizona is always a lovely thing.
Wait, let me get out my mini violin. So Sher, you've had an amazing career, and I know you're doing some incredible things. Take us back to some of your earlier years. You know, when we talk about work from the inside out, there are a lot of really interesting stories that for some people start, you know, as early as their developmental years. And some people had interesting role models. Some people had dreams from their early years. Take us back to some of your earlier years and tell us how those might have formed or shaped what you're doing today.
So it's interesting because I think some of your listeners will resonate with this. I've always been what I term a dual personality. I am one of those people who is on one side very type A. As you know, I like to get things done, highly organized, really have the world captured and structured. And the other side of me is very creative. I love doing artistic things. When I was young, I was in theater, just total opposites that kind of come together. And so it was always a struggle for me in school because I never really fit in one, group or one category. I like to do lots of different things. My interests are always piqued by something new and fun. And it's always something in the artistic side. I was never an athlete. I wasn't into doing that sort of thing. But I loved doing painting and taking art classes and really just, testing what was out there. At the same time, I've always been someone who really struggles with the word no or the phrase, it can't be done. Those two have been highly annoying to me my entire life since I was small. So I think back when I was in high school, I had two teachers who really, really supported me. One who saw that I was someone who should go to college and do something. I did not see that. I'm a first generation college student. And so it was not something that was on my radar other than people saying to you, you should go to college. I had another teacher who was my chemistry teacher, who was just a fantastic individual and just used to say to me, he'd say, "You're weird, kid, but you're going to find your way." And I always used to laugh when he'd say that. And I actually wrote him many years ago and I said, okay, you were right. And his response to me was, I was always right. I've always been right, because that's just kind of who he was. So I went to college with absolutely no focus, no real vision, no goal, no plan other than, okay, I should go to college, so I'm here. And I really struggled. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was not a great student. I was a great networker, we'll call it. I really had a good time at college, but I didn't really focus on the academic side. Met my husband.
I'm curious about that because, you said like you were always somebody who liked to get things done. There was always this party that was organized. And so it's an interesting kind of paradox in a way that it sounds like you didn't quite know what you wanted to do or that you didn't have an area of focus. So how did you sort of reconcile that part of you that liked to get things done, that liked to have a focus, it sounds like, and maybe that was part of the struggle, but how did you channel that? Did you channel that more into sort of social things or other extracurricular activities?
So here's what I learned about myself. Two things. One was I met my husband in college, but we were friends and we dated, but we were also friends. And, he has a very different perspective than I do. And so it was always interesting to see things through someone else's eyes and to hear different ways to look at things. And to analyze things. And so that definitely was an eye-opening experience for me. But I also started to figure out that I did really, really well when it was something I was interested in. And then upon going back and kind of reassessing myself and talking to people and stuff, it became pretty apparent that if it was something I really enjoyed and loved, boy, I was whole hog, 100% in, not a problem. Organize, get it done, move forward. If it was something I wasn't interested in, there was not a lot of drive or interest to complete that. So once I figured that out, that was really helpful. So when I got out of school, naturally you take a job in your major and you start moving forward.
What was your major?
Hospitality management. So ironically, I got hired to work at a university conference center and thus became my introduction to the academic world. Because at that point I was auxiliary and I was working, all of you have been to events at, ballrooms at universities and people get married there and people have banquets there and such. And so that was what I was working with, conferences and social events for new students and those sorts of things. But then I moved over to admissions. I had a wonderful person who walked up to me one day who turned out to be the director of admissions. And she said, "You need to come work for me. You're wasting your time over here." Again, saw something I didn't. So I went and I worked in admissions and on the student services side for about 10 years, changed schools a couple of times because of, by this point I'm married and we're doing some job changing and such. And then we went to a very small community in Wyoming, and my husband and I were both working for the same institution, of which there's only one in this particular city. And so my boss, or our boss, I should say, said to me, "This is a problem. You two are going to get bottlenecked in your careers. So one of you needs to move to the academic side." And my first thought was, blah, that's not something I want to do. Why would I go over there? And then at this point in the mid 90s, distance education was starting to take off, what we now call e-learning and online education. And so we had an opportunity to kind of test the waters and start to figure some things out. So he gave that to me as a project. He's like, well, look into this, see what you can figure out about it, see what you can do. And so I started looking into it. I did a certificate to try to get a better handle on, what this up and coming thing was. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with it. So really? I did 2 more certificates and a master's and a doctorate, all with a focus on teaching, learning, and designing in the online element. So that really was my academic takeoff. And then spent the next 20 years working in that.
You said you did 2 certificates, a master's and a doctorate, and that was your academic takeoff. That sounds like an academic, that's a little more than a takeoff. That's a whole journey, really.
So we come back to the point of, if it's something I really like,
right?
I go whole hog.
Yes. So was that all still while you were in Wyoming? Because I know that you went. I know that you were in Arizona at some point, and you went to Wyoming. I know you were in South Carolina at some point, well, fairly recently, and then you've now since moved back to Arizona.
Right.
So how many different universities did you and your husband kind of move back and forth to? Were there chunks of years in each place, or I'm just curious sort of what the kind of trajectory was a little bit.
So there's probably been for each of us about roughly 10 institutions, not always at the same one, at different ones. One of the things that you learn in academia is that there are 2 ways to move up in your career. One is to stay eternally. So you become an evergreen kind of individual at that institution, and you wait and you hope that people move up so that positions become open. The other way is that you move around to different institutions. For me, what I quickly learned was, because everybody was new to online, this was at the same time that was the birth of the for-profit institutions. So I did work for some of the for-profits as well, because I wanted to see how they did things. There are all sorts of feelings about for-profit institutions. Some people love them, some people hate them, some people are kind of in the middle. The fact of the matter is, they did some things very, very well. They showed higher ed that, academia can move faster and can let go of some of that historical, structure that just impedes movement and growth and innovation. Mm-hmm. Some of the things they didn't do as well. Sure. And obviously that came out in the news and people saw that. But I can tell you that there are also public institutions that have those same problems. They just don't always make it in the news. But I actually, when we moved to Arizona the first time, I was just finishing my doctorate. I literally wrote my 5th chapter in the car in the 2 days that we drove down, because I had a deadline to get it back to them. And, with trying to pack and move and everything, the window became very, very small. So my husband drove, and I sat literally with a laptop on my lap and typed, and probably saw nothing the entire drive down here.
Wow.
But I was able to always move up in position, always find a different position, always find new things that were of interest. So, I was able to work in corporate training. I worked for a private institutional university within construction. So, you see a different way, because they're running their own university for their own employees, and they're setting it up to simulate a university. But obviously your credentialing is different, because it matters that you learn the skill sets and the things that they need you to learn in order to be beneficial to that company. But they also will pay for you to take classes outside of the institution and to gain degrees depending upon your position and your level. So it was a really interesting mixture of understanding how those 2 worlds kind of, work together. And so we were in Arizona for about 10 years. And then my last official role I took was in South Carolina. And at that point, I had reached the highest level that I could in the lineage of online learning. So in the academic structure, once you've reached vice presidency or vice chancellor or vice provost in a specific area, the only roles up beyond that become generalized roles, which is the university provost and the university president. I have never had an interest in either of those positions, even though for years people have said to me, this, you should do this. This is your natural progression. But I know myself, and that is not where my interest lies. So that became the determination of taking all of the things that I'd learned and all the experiences and all the education, and bringing it back around into doing something different, kind of in what I call phase 2 of my life. And I have to share with you that while I was working in Arizona the first time, and by this point, e-learning is really growing and taking off, and
Right.
everyone's starting to do it. We started getting into concerns about intellectual property, digital media, copyright. So because I was a university employee, I went back to school and I got a 4th degree.
No way.
Again, because as I started digging into it, it really intrigued me.
Yeah.
So I did a master's in legal studies with a focus on digital media and intellectual property, which has been very beneficial to me in many, many ways over the years.
It's been beneficial to me too, actually.
Many people, many of my friends, I am not a lawyer. I do not practice as a lawyer. I'm not licensed to practice as a lawyer. But I can give you, legal information and point you in the right direction.
Well,
and
I know that's
really helpful.
And I think because of that background that you have, it's really helpful. You have a way of looking at things and thinking about things and asking questions in certain ways that many of us don't. And I know it's been enormously helpful. I just want to make sure I get the trajectory right here. So did you leave Wyoming and then go to Arizona for that time period? I see.
Yes.
So the boss that you had in Wyoming really had a vision, had an idea for you, and it really sparked a whole trajectory of both education and a whole sort of opening up of your career that, it sounds like that he really, really, I guess, was sort of a catalyst for you in some ways.
He really was. And so ironically, he's retired now, was here a couple months ago, I think it was. And we managed to have a socially, distanced meeting kind of thing, because we've remained, friends and colleagues for many, many years now. And I said that to him. I said, unbeknownst to you, you trajectorized my entire career. And he's always been amazed because he was always one to look at things outside the box. And for an academic, that's, not normally a trait that they carry.
No.
And so he would always think about the what ifs, and there were many times where I would, talk to him about something, even after I left, we would have conversations and I'd say, well, what do you think about this? And he'd say, well, why wouldn't you do it? That was always his first question. Why wouldn't you do it?
Do it.
And then he'd say, I'm not saying to do it,
right,
but you have to ask the question, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And so that's always been something, that's been tucked away with me as I look at things. I always look at it from an opposite perspective. And so, going to law school, for the first time, you're learned to teach or to think in a way that's not the way you've been taught your entire life, K through 12, even if you say K through 20, teaches you to think in a different way. So, I always say where I end up now is because, my husband, who studied philosophy as an undergrad, had a different perspective of looking at things. And we would talk about the different ways that things go, and still has that different perspective. My colleague who would say to me, you've got to think about why wouldn't you do this? And then you combine that with the law degree, and suddenly it's, wow, you really step back and really analyze in a totally different way. And I found that to be very useful in my academic work, because it does add a different stability to research and to writing than you normally get.
Yeah.
based on, your previous training.
I'm curious, as you were going through this process of getting these certificates and then the master's and the PhD, were you at any point considering, going on a sort of a tenure track professor type path in terms of being a, full-time teaching, research, sort of publish or perish kind of path? Because it sounds like, for the most part, I know you did teach, and I know that you worked with students quite a bit, but it sounds like you really stayed more on the administrative student services side of things over the years. Is that right?
The majority of my career has been with dual appointments.
Okay.
So I've had an administrative role, which may be on the student services side, or it may be on the academic side, because there are administrative academics, but then I would also have teaching as part of that actual obligation. My one stint at looking at tenure came at a time where there was a lot of what we'll say paper shuffling and a disagreement over whether or not that's a granting opportunity because it's part of another contract. So, you get into those kinds of, they're not legal issues, but they're kind of academic legal issues. But it was never my intent to go and be a full-time professor and teach and become a, department chair or a dean, or that part never interested me. When I was a dean, it was because I was an academic dean over an administrative and academic unit. So there was still the strategic planning and the structure of running and maintaining that. That's always been what my academic roles have been. So I've either had faculty report to me, or I've had faculty in a dotted line that I've worked with. But it's always been, then teaching has always been an option and part of that. And also when you work in online, you do a lot of teaching to the very constituents who are working in your department. So software training faculty, best practices and how they teach online and how they migrate from a ground class forward. So teaching takes on a little bit of a different level sometimes, in addition to just traditional teaching that you do. I did a lot of early online teaching because at institutions, most faculty weren't teaching online yet.
Right.
And so it was an easy transition for me. And then I could help get other faculty to move over. So, it's more of the Tom Sawyer paint the fence kind of idea of, gee, my head didn't blow off and, my computer didn't blow off. So you too can do this.
Yeah.
And so that teaching piece was always a little bit different for me than any of the traditional paths. And for my colleagues who are also in that same kind of path, they dip their toes in the teaching areas, but we tend to be kind of counted in a different measurement than a traditional academic faculty.
And so did you think of yourself as being a little less traditional or on the cutting edge of what you were doing? Like, it sounds like you had a sense of groundedness in terms of who you were and continuing to go in the direction of the things you were interested in as you went forward. I could see where there's a lot of external pressures in an academic institution. I have several family members who are academics, and so I've had extensive conversations with them about all the different factors that go into having an academic career. And
sure.
So, and depending on what discipline you're in, those pressures can be somewhat different. The requirements are different.
Absolutely.
So I'm not generalizing it, but I do know that there are a lot of different, external pressures, requirements, and things that you really you kind of have to fit yourself into, so to speak.
Right.
And it sounds like you kind of carved your own path in many ways. I'm sure there were times when you fit yourself into certain things. But it sounds like you were somewhat intentional as you went forward. Is that accurate?
It is. And it's interesting from a couple of perspectives because one, I have always been on my own path since I was young. And that doesn't serve you well in a world that has, specifics of what you should be doing and how you should be doing it and all. And for some reason, I always knew that I was kind of the odd man out, but it never really bothered me. I wanted to do things the way I wanted to do them. Part of the joy of doing e-learning and online when it first started was there was no rule book and there was no precedence for it. And so you kind of got to make it up as you went along. Mm-hmm. I have a group of colleagues, there's 9 of us who we joke that we grew up with the e-learning segment and all of us became, VPs or VCs in the field. And we joke about it because at that time, there were 2 schools in the nation that offered instructional design as a major. You didn't find credentialed people and you didn't have people that were necessarily, good at software and applications. You had pure engineering students who were really great at the hardware applications.
Right.
So you had to figure out how to do all of these things. And every time something new came out, it seemed to inevitably break something else that you had. Mm-hmm. And, there wasn't the seamless connectivity that there is now where you just pick, I'm using a PC or I'm using Mac and you click and it all happens. Right. There used to be a lot of back work that had to be done to make things, talk to each other and work together. So we all grew up doing everything. We learned the tech side, we learned the software side, we learned the hardware side. We had to teach, we had to figure out, when somebody above said to us, we want 5 courses next fall. Okay, how do we make that work? What does that mean? What are we doing? We had to understand working with vendors and really piecing out what it is that they offered versus what they told us they offered. And then, or maybe finding out that, this is like saying, oh, I'm going to order a cup holder, for my new car. And then you find out that the cup holder was made 20 years ago. And so it's not made to fit in a car that was built in 2020. There was a lot of retrofitting that had to occur. So that allowed me to do what I do best, which is just take off and do it and, problem solve. And I've always been a person that the stickier the problem, the more intriguing it is to me to fix it, to figure it out. So that was always, really advantageous as well, because I didn't have to fit into the purely academic side or the purely student services side. I could fit kind of in the middle in this gray area and work with both. Now, that being said, there were always 2 types of people that were after me. One was planning my career and saying, you're wasting your time over here, go start doing this and do that. This is where you need to go next. And that was always hard conversations.
Who were those people? I'm curious.
They would be faculty. They would be, other administrators. I might present at a conference and someone would come and say to me, well, what are you doing? And I tell them and they're like, oh, well, that's not going to go anywhere. E-learning is not going to hang on. It's just a phase. Funny. So you need to get out of there. So there was always that voice. Then there were the voices who were purely naysayers because they didn't understand e-learning and they really didn't even want any part of it. So, they would just say, well, you're wasting your time. And well, you're not a real academic because you don't know anything. You're just overplaying in this area. And so you had to put up with that voice as well of people saying, who are you? Before I had advanced degrees, it was pure and simple. Why are you, a person with a bachelor's degree, telling me, someone with a doctorate, how I'm going to teach my course as an academic in a different platform? Yeah, that's not going to happen. Right. So I learned early on it had to be a lot of relationship building. It had to become down. I'm not here to destroy your world and make you work harder. I'm here to make you look good. I'm here to make you have a great experience. I'm here to support you. And in order to do that, you and I have to have enough of a relationship for you to trust me to do these things. For you to trust me to be, even think about it. In the early 90s, we would say to a faculty member, you need to add me to your class as a student. I'm going to be a dummy student, but I'm going to see what you do. I'm going to watch what you do. I'm going to be in there. That's like saying, I'm going to come sit in your classroom for the entire hour and judge what you're doing.
Yeah.
That just didn't happen in academia. And so it made them very, very uncomfortable.
I bet.
But, you and I, for example, are good friends and colleagues. And so if I said to you, hey, I'm just going to sit in the room and watch you do a podcast.
Yeah.
Now you would be like, okay, sure. Have a seat.
Okay. I'd be like,
yeah,
put it on,
So, but if you didn't know me, you would be like, I'm not comfortable having a stranger in here, while I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to manage my guests and do all of these things. So it was hard sometimes because people were mean. I mean, they were very mean about it. I won't make bones about it. People have said some horrible things to me over the years.
Yeah.
And when we talk about it, when I ask my colleagues, they've all dealt with it as well. I mean, I have a good colleague who at the time was pregnant, went on maternity leave for mere 6 weeks.
Yeah.
6 weeks, had it all covered, had staff there, everything, came back. And the first person said to her, you should have just stayed home and raised your child instead of coming and disrupting my class.
Wow.
So you start to get very thick-skinned.
Boy, that would not go over in 2020, 2021.
No. Yeah, it was a different time. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And so it's a different time. The institution values the faculty because they're the heart of the institution. Going and saying to someone, this is what they said to me, they're going to say, it's just how they are. Just kind of go with it. So you're thinking, what's the point in saying something? There aren't any real channels. If you go to HR, they kind of pat your hand and go, oh, we're sorry. We hope tomorrow's better. We don't have all the rules and regs we do now. We don't have all the ways to deal with things now.
Right.
And you knew your place in the organizational structure. So you became thick-skinned, and we joke about it now among all of us, even to this day, that we're just like, you learned how to navigate the waters, and you figured out who to tap into first. Who are the willing participants? Who are the people that support you? And the faculty that are angry or the people that don't want to do anything different, just leave them till the end, because sometimes they come over by attrition.
Right.
And so it's, all of those things contribute to who you become and how you learn to deal with things and how you learn to say, okay, not a great comment, not a great situation, but I'm just going to kind of disengage myself from that and look at it from their perspective. I'm coming in like a stormtrooper. I'm messing with their livelihood. They're known for, how they publish, how they present, what they do. They've been touted to them for 20 years that they're an expert in this field.
Right.
They're on a pedestal, and now I'm going to come in and just tear all that down. So I got to look at it from how they're seeing it. And then it's not so bad because their reaction was emotional. And it's emotional because I'm rattling them and I don't even know what else is going on in their life. Maybe the extra work I need them to do, they don't have time for because of something else that's happening. So it's been an interesting journey for all of us that came up during the time, and for me, working in different locations, different institutions, different parts of the country has also afforded me to see the nature and the culture of what goes on and how things are handled and how things work there. And so, I'm thankful. I've had a wonderful career because of the right people, of being in the right place at the right time, of taking advantage of opportunities, even when they're horrible opportunities.
That's
you get into it.
Moron, though, isn't it? A horrible opportunity.
It is, because you see an opportunity and day two, you're like, whoa, this was not a good idea. But I'm going to learn from it.
So I'm curious. So, because you're painting a picture of, being really, it sounds like on the one hand, you are totally engaged and excited about this new field that you are a pioneer in, and you are loving it. And yet every step of the way, you are meeting with not just resistance, but, really, some downright nasty behavior. And this is not just going on for a semester. This is going on for years. And so I'm curious if anywhere along the way you at any point started to doubt yourself and your commitment to this, or said to yourself, maybe this isn't worth it, or maybe there was some period of those years when you were more affiliated with those private schools where they were far more amenable to that, or were there release valves somewhere along the way? Because even though I know you said I've always been a little bit different, and I didn't mind that, and I get that, and I get the thick skin part, but I also know that thick skins can wear out after a while. So I'm kind of curious how you maintained that trajectory, because I know you did. And yet I am sure, having worked in an academic setting myself, I know what it's like to ask somebody who is very much recognized as an expert in their field, to ask them to engage with something that's different, and to step into their territory at all. And I know how difficult that can be. And you did it over and over and over again over many years. So how did you do that?
Button for
how did
punishment.
you persevere?
And I don't want anyone to think that I've had this magical career where everything came together and, there were stars in the sky and all of that. I mean, if you ever talk to my husband, you would know, as all good spouses do, he would hear the grousing and the, this is it, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. And we all go through that.
Sure.
I think where you really have to focus on, and what I learned was, on my worst day, suddenly I get an email from a student about what a great class I had and what a great faculty member I was. Or I'd get a note from someone, just an email maybe, that just said, wow, thanks so much for stepping in and saving my class today. I so appreciated it. Or thanks for understanding that I couldn't meet at the last minute because, I had to go pick my kid up. And it's just so nice of you to come in Saturday morning and meet with me, because I know, it's the weekend, you don't work weekends. And so you would find little nuggets where you would get excited. When you work with students, you always find a way where either it's individually or it's a group. You look at the scores of all your students at the end of a course and you're like, wow, a majority of them did very, very well. I didn't lose anybody. I didn't have anybody that was detrimental at the end, C's and above. Everybody worked hard. Everybody showed up. Everybody did their thing. And you also, surround yourself. Stephen Covey always said, surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
And get rid of the negative people. And so you can't get rid of the negative people that you work with. That's true of any of us, of any place that you work. Yeah. But you can build your network where you can call somebody and you can freely grouse, who understands, who's been in your position, who just says, I know you're going to believe this, but here's what I heard this morning, Right. And the other part is, when you have employees, you shouldn't have the luxury of being able to have that, Debbie Downer kind of day, because your mood affects their mood. And so what you have to do then is you have to step back and think about, I have to make it to where they understand this isn't appropriate, and I have to show them the right way to work through it. And so, I always was very conscious of the fact that there were always pairs of eyes watching me. So if I blow up and I say, that was just the worst person ever, and
right,
that's going to carry over to them. And even if maybe that worst person just had a bad day, I've forever changed how my staff looks at that person. Mm-hmm. And that's a responsibility that I wasn't willing to take. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to grouse with somebody, I need to have somebody outside the circle that I can grouse to. I can freely spout, get it off my chest, and then move on. But in terms of my staff and the people around me, I have to say, you know what? Maybe they're just having a bad day. Bottom line, we got to fix this problem. We got to help them get through this. And you move it forward. My circle of people, some of them have been in my circle for 40 years. We're very close. We talk about anything and everything, and we're okay with each other, and we're okay with each other enough to say, okay, snap out of it. It was one issue, get over it, move on.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. And I think people oftentimes don't do that. They don't find that group of trustworthy individuals that they can rely on. And so their grousing either happens at work, which changes the trajectory of how things are going,
right,
or they're looked at as a person who whines.
Right.
Women are notorious for this, and they do it for all the right reasons, because we're a tribe. Women like to talk to other women. We like to share. That's just how we're built. When you don't have that external group to go to, you do it internally. And then once you're doing it internally, other people that you're working with are looking at you going, man, she's always whining about something. Man, everything upsets her, everything, So you get that label that's really not fair, because they haven't seen the things that you've dealt with that day.
Right.
All they've seen is the trajectory and the outcome of how you're handling it. And so then you hear it. Well, women are hard to work with. Women are difficult. Women, you have to be careful because, they take everything emotionally. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes you just accidentally label yourself that way because of how you're handling things. So I always had really good mentors that said to me, if you're going to be in this field and you're going to create new things and you're going to move forward, then you're going to have to do it in a way that fits within the structure that's already there, and that's going to be to where they're not focusing on the fact that you're a female doing this. And so that, those words have always rung true with me. And I have had good female mentors who have said to me, yeah, you need to get a grip and do this better. And that's been invaluable to me over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very helpful. And what I also know about you is that you did last year, was it about a little over a year ago now, or around a year ago, you moved from South Carolina to Arizona.
Yep, a year Thanksgiving.
I can't believe it's been a year already.
I know.
So it's been a very interesting year for all of us. You made another big leap, and you left the University of South Carolina and said, I am really no longer going to be immersed in the academic world. And I know you still have some ties there and some responsibilities there, but you are no longer an employee of an academic institution.
No.
And you spread your wings. And you moved back to Arizona. So tell us all about your company, which you've been building over the last few years, EdTech Consulting. Tell us, Downing EdTech Consulting, all about that, because that's been growing by leaps and bounds. And with the current pandemic that we're in, the demand has skyrocketed.
Absolutely.
How are you holding up?
I'm looking forward to the next 2 weeks when I have some downtime and my email isn't blowing up every day.
We are recording this right before the Christmas holiday 2020, although this will air in 2021. But yes, I'm wishing you well in your time off. But but contextually, this will air while we are still dealing with the pandemic. And how
sadly,
amazing is it that you are doing all this work that has served so many people so well during this time. But even prior to that, things were good.
When I took my last role, I knew it was going to be my last role. As we talked about, I didn't want to be a provost. I didn't want to be a president. My actual provost, who was the one at the time at the university, actually said to me, have you considered this? I think this needs to be your next step. And I said, oh, thanks for thinking of me, but no.
Yeah.
That's just not me.
Yeah.
Again, because I need things that spark my interest. And so part of the reason of deciding that last position was it in the realm was I had done everything I could accomplish in that field within academia. Now, there are lots of roles to move into enterprise spaces and innovation spaces at institutions and stuff. But you're kind of building a better mousetrap still for the university. And I just decided that, I was just kind of done with that portion. I wanted to go do something different. And as faculty members, and even as staff members, once you get into middle and upper management in institutions, there's always a variety of consulting that you're doing on behalf of the university. You may be, hired as a speaker for somewhere. You may be hired to help another institution with a problem. Many times, smaller schools will go to larger schools and say, we have this problem. We know you've already fixed it. We'd love to get someone from your staff to help us do this. So there's always a natural built-in of doing consultations in that kind of arena.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about, well, what's next? If I don't do this, this is what if I don't do it? Then what am I going to be doing?
Right.
And I used to joke when every time we've had a recession and people would say, well, what if we lose our jobs? I would always joke and I'd say, well, I'm happy to work at Target and make money. I just need to be sure they put doctor on my name tag, art greeter, whatever. But, they need to make sure doctor's on there so they know I'm an academic. And so I started thinking about, how do I build a business? And, joined a mastermind group, which is where I met you. And hosts of other great people, but just started ferreting out, what do I do and what do I understand that people don't? And what I really kind of got down to was there's a lot of things in our world that at surface value we know a name of. Social media. Everybody knows about social media. But if you ask someone, well, what are your KPIs? And, what are your Google Analytics looking like? People just look at you and their mouth drops open because that's not part of what they do.
Right.
And so I realized that with online learning, it was the same thing. We had, projected doing online learning, whether for academic use or for non-credit or for just, personalized learning. But people still didn't really understand, how do I build it? How do I get it going? Where do I house it? What does all this do? And so, I knew I had a natural background in that to start to offer that. I knew I had a vast network nationwide where I could find contractors to work on projects and do things. The other area that I always get hit up a lot with was, people reaching out and saying, here's where I'm at in my career that's kind of mirroring what you've done. How do I move forward? How do I do the next thing? So I did coaching certification so that I could start helping people figure out what their next steps were, what their trajectories were, because we're still the minority in the academic world. There's not a lot of roles out there. There's not a lot of movement in them. And I had the luxury of, it was my husband and I and some cats. We could pick up and move easily. And I have a spouse who is tremendously supportive of me and who would move and go, who would look at me and go, well, we've never lived there. Or he'd say something like, well, that looks like an interesting spot. Let's try it. Yeah. And because he's credentialed and knowledgeable, could always find work wherever we went. Yeah. Not everybody can do that. If you have children, it's hard to do that. And it's unfair to them to, disrupt them when they're in school, find new friends, all of those kinds of things. So oftentimes, when I talk to people, it's, well, I want to do what you've done, but, the next opening is 4 states over and we can't do that. So I help them figure out, what can you do where you're at? How can you prepare? Because in 4 years, your kids will be gone and off to college and you will be able to move then, or you're going to want to move then. A lot of times you hear people say, well, we're staying in one place until the kids graduate high school. And then, we've always dreamed of moving to a warmer climate. We don't want to live in the snow anymore. So where's the dream spots you're looking at? We've got 4 years to figure out that trajectory. And in the meantime, start to make contacts down there and build your network. Right. So, coaching became another natural piece of that, in helping people find their pathway in that. And then the other gape is working with vendors. People don't understand oftentimes what vendors are talking about, and they don't want to ask. I always attribute it that it's much like going to the doctor. When you go to the doctor and he tells you they've noticed something and here's the kind of medications they're going to put you on, but this one's only for 3 days because, and they go through all of that detail, and you sit there and you smile and you go, okay, great, all right. And, they hand you the prescription, you walk out, and then you go, I don't know what just happened.
Yeah.
And you get home and you're like, should I have food with this? Should I not?
Yeah.
And there's all these questions, but you've already kind of signed off on it.
Yeah.
Software and hardware and using any sort of platform applications is the same way. Oftentimes people are like, oh, this is great. And then they don't understand what they've actually signed on to or what they've discussed. So, we try to be the person at the table that can either warm transfer them if they feel like they have a handle on things, or we can sit with them through the entire process so that we can interpret for them what the vendor is saying and what that means on their end and what would happen. So, bottom line, all 3 of those areas, coaching, affiliate partnerships, and e-learning development, come down to relationships and helping people understand better. So my intent was that these things were going to take off and we were going to grow all of them slowly. We had a 3-year plan moving forward. I was transitioning out of full-time work so that I could devote full-time to doing this. And then the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden there was just mass chaos of what needs to be done. And we need help with this. And even things as small as, we'd love to hire you to sit in on a 2-hour call. We have a plan. This is what we think we need to do to put everybody online and get them off of our campus, but we need validation. So I would sit on a 2-hour call. They'd go through their whole plan. We'd get to the end and I'd say, you didn't think about X, Y, and Z, and you're going to need this. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's exactly what we needed to know. And that might be the only context I had with them. But they knew, and then I would follow up with them. And yes, everything's going fine. And you were absolutely right. We did need to think about this. So, the relationship building and the identifying of the gaps and helping them transition and interpret suddenly went from 0 to 100 by May 1st. Fortunately, I have a fabulous team, great people who support me, who are all contractors, but, are loyal to the cause, as I call it, understood, worked hard. We turned around many, many projects just fast and efficiently, took the time to talk with people, walk them through things when they needed it. We really just, were able to service as many people as we could in as many places as we could, but also to help them to understand and move forward.
Yeah.
And we really wanted them to have the training and knowledge just to have, never anticipating there'd be a round 2 of this.
Right.
So now, the conversations are a little different. They're not scared. They're not panicked. Now it's, okay, we're back to this again. And here's what we're thinking, and could you do a couple little one-offs for us? In addition, we've picked up a lot of people who have lost jobs, who have been laid off, who have taken early retirement, even though they're only in their mid-50s, and are now saying, you know what, I'm not going back to another company. I'm not doing this again. I've always wanted to own my own business. I'm going to start. I'm going to do it. So I just need help figuring out, how do I do this? How do I get set up? I'd love to offer some online live sessions, some online tape sessions. What's the best product to use for that? Where do I store these things at? Is Zoom the best product for me to use? And so now we're working with individuals on figuring out all of those kinds of things as well, because in essence, it's the same thing. Right. They're trying something new and they just need some direction and some understanding. And we test so many products and we have experience with so many products that we can say easily, look at this one, don't look at that one. This one is great, but you don't want to spend this much money this early on. Here's something that will get you by until you start to really have a revenue source. And then you can move up into something that's a little better. We're big on telling you if there's a free product, and we'll say to you, use this as long as you can. A good example is yesterday, somebody's building an online workbook. And she said, well, it came up and it said that I have to buy the paid version. And I said, you have to have 3 spaces open. They always give you 3 workbooks you do for free. I said, so download one of those. And if you want to keep it, download it and keep it on your hard drive, not on their cloud, because that's counting as one of your spaces. I said, and are either of those like a draft? And she said, yeah, one was a draft. I said, are you going to use it? She said, no, we decided not to go that way. I said, delete it. Now you've got 2 open spaces. You can build your workbook still for free. Once you start selling your workbook, then you can buy the membership and get all the extra bells and whistles. So, we really try to work with people and figure that out. I work with them, my team works with them, but we really want to help them navigate and be successful in doing this and try to take some of the pain points out of it.
Right. And tell us more about the Speakers Resource Group, of which I am a member.
Yes. So we are so excited. We're getting ready to do a big January kickoff, because January is when all of us start to think about, bettering ourselves, self-improvement, professional development, because we're gonna kick off the new year right. And that's always true of every New Year's, but this year it's especially true. So one of the GAPEs, I'm big on looking at GAPEs. It's the researcher in me. I always saw that there was a group of people who were expert speakers who could afford to take a $10,000 or $20,000, mastermind group or speakers group that were, really launching and saying, boy, I want that 5-figure Tony Robbins kind of stage. That's what I'm going for. And then there's those people that are local, going to their local speakers bureau, and they never get outside of that. They never get challenged. They never get growth, because what they can afford is a very small group that is fit purely to their culture. And then, of course, with my background, there's a group of transitionals, which are academics who for years who have been on a stage in front of a group, but it's always been a voice talking down to them, delivering pertinent information. They may do keynotes, but it's always that same audience of, I am here as an expert pushing information out to you. Many of those people do very, very well, but when they retire, they decide they want to go out and get on the speakers, circuit.
Right.
And that's a different audience.
Right.
You're no longer up there to just shove that information down to them. So many academics, I saw were saying they were struggling because they weren't getting, interest in their topics or interest in what they were presenting. Oftentimes you get asked to give a little reel, 2 or 3 minutes, and they tape it just like they tape their lecture.
Right.
And so it just wasn't fitting what the audience wanted. So talked to a lot of people, started looking at where are the gapes, where can we fulfill that, and how can we do that in what we do best, which is with technology and with building relationships. So we came together with the Speakers Resource Group, which is a membership, and individuals can join the membership and have access to a variety of experts, not just in speaking, but in how to build a better presentation, how to use Zoom, what hair and makeup should look like when you're on a Zoom call versus when you're in person, the right color to wear when you're, being cast out on a large screen, all of these different kinds of things. And so we started collecting experts such as yourself to talk about, maybe part of my speaking problem isn't just fear of being in front of a crowd, but maybe it's lack of self-esteem. Maybe I need a coach to help me figure out, really what my messaging is. We have a gentleman who is a very well-known New York photographer who had to pivot his business and start doing photography via Zoom because people still needed headshots. People still needed content. And he now is putting together, self-help courses of, okay, I've got my iPhone and I want to do some of my own shots. What do I need to be thinking about? The right lighting, is my desk clean? What am I looking at behind me? And so he's doing some courses that will be available through there. Okay. So it's really a platform for people to come and get a wide variety of information, but it's also a testing ground. Yeah. So if they take a class from you or they sit through one of your webinars and they go, that's who I want to be my coach. Mm-hmm. That's who I want to connect with. Now they've got a relationship with you. Right. And they can reach out to you and say, loved your class, loved you talking to us in the community. Now I want to work with you individually. Because oftentimes too, you're picking a coach or you're picking, someone to teach you just off of paper. And if you think back to college, if you remember, you'd get the schedule. And what's the first thing you did? You asked upperclassmen, well, who did you take for this course? Right. And they would say, oh, take this person, or, oh, don't take that person because, he's boring or he doesn't have any slides or, you learned very quickly through a relationship that that's how you learned to get the best, to get the right quality. Right. And that's what we want this to be, which is, we'll have different people that do lots of different things, a little bit of crossover here and there. But suddenly you've got a menu, right? And you can look through and go, wow, I really want to work with this person. And I'm going to invest in myself on a personal level. Aside from the membership, I'm going to go directly to them and work with them and learn more so that I can be ready and I can be prepared. So we're very excited. We have a really great group of experts coming on board, and we have more that are coming on board. We're actually doing a feature in a magazine that comes out in January called Soar to Success, which is talking about, doing some of these things. Recently, I also did a little bit of a story on it in a book called The Power of Why.
I was 28 women who about the book.
Yeah. So, 28 women who design online courses and why they chose to do it. We have a new book launching December 22nd called The Power of Why, 29 Women Who Decided to Design a Membership. And that really is focused on the Speakers Resource Group. And so, bottom line, we want a comfort level for people. It's going to have a community. So when you think about like a Facebook group, it's going to be that kind of a community where you can get together, you can talk, you can share, you can buddy up and find others who are kind of in your similar situation. Mm-hmm. And then, we can help you and navigate you. We have a community engagement director who's going to check in regularly, talk with people, motivate you to move forward, give you recommendations when you say, boy, I'm really struggling with this. Oh, here's one of our experts who, focuses on that. You may want to have that connection. So we're really excited to just help other people build relationships, take advantage of the technology, and to feel comfortable in the technology.
Well, that really ties it up with a bow, doesn't it?
My whole life, has been about people and figuring out things that nobody wants to deal with. And I have truly come full circle.
and you do it with so much joy and generosity. And I just completely appreciate the way you go about it, the way you carry yourself, Sher. I just feel so lucky to know you.
Well, good mentors have taught me that it's not about holding all your cards in and keeping everything. It's about sharing with others because you will get it back twofold. And I've always had such tremendous luck with that because people know they can come to me and I will help them out. Obviously, I'm a business owner and I need to make money. Yeah. But, I do want to figure out ways that we can help even the lowest denominator. As an academic, it's the same thing. You want to teach and you want to make sure that everyone in your class is successful every single time you teach. It's not just, oh, this class is going to be great. The next one, don't care about. I've always carried that through. That generosity always comes back and it does many times over. And I always encourage people, to your listeners, if you're doing something, share with other people.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you have to give away the farm.
Right.
But, don't be afraid to help out someone, and you'll be amazed at what comes back from that. Because you never know what that person's going to do in their career. I can tell you, I've been on several podcasts from people who I knew 20, 30 years ago, who I built a relationship with then, hadn't even heard from them in many, many years. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, when they saw what I was doing, reached out and was just like, oh my gosh, we've got to do this. And have large audiences, which is great for my business to project out. And so you don't know what you don't know. So if you always err on the side of sharing, good things always come from it.
I'm going to ask you for one more thing, and that is to tell our audience what's the best way they can find you. Everything will be in the show notes, links to your books that are coming out and everything. But what's the best way for people to find you? Sure.
So probably the easiest two ways to find me is either to look me up on LinkedIn. If you go directly, if you're a type in person, it's /Sher Downing, or you can just search me on there and find me. Send me a message, connect with me. Would love to talk with you more. You can also go to our website, which is www.downingedtech.com. We have a contact us button on there. I will tell you, all of those go into a box, and I do see all of them, so I have someone that processes, but I do see all of them, and I check that religiously. So I'm always happy to start up a conversation with someone. We are getting ready to launch our new website, so it's going to be going over some transition in the next couple of weeks. So we're very excited about that. But our current website will continue to stay up, and then it'll get reverted over to our new site as soon as it's ready. So so when your audience listens to this, they can still contact me through there quite easily.
Wonderful. Well, Sher, thank you so much. And by the way, that is Sher with an S, as opposed to Sher.
Although the Starbucks people always do like to put a C on it. So.
I bet they do. As long as they don't ask you to start singing, right?
That's right.
Anyway, thank you so much. This has been delightful. And I know that my listeners are going to really get so much out of this. So thank you again for being here today.
You are quite welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Sher Downing. It was so interesting to speak with her to learn about her professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at www.tammygoulerloeb.com. Just look for episode 111. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Do you feel a little bit stuck? Get specialized group and individualized support, insights, and accountability from a brilliant mix of professional women in a safe, non-judgmental creative space. Join one of my small hybrid mastermind coaching groups starting on a rolling basis. You can learn more at https://bit.ly/navigating career change. If you were inspired by this episode with Sher, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd really love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thanks so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, You can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.